Whispers of an American Festival, Part 1. The Streets of Light ***. The evening sky of October hung low over the small American town of Maplebrook. A soft wind blew through the maple trees, scattering a few golden leaves across the quiet streets. The town had already begun to glow. Strings of lights hung from porches, and the faint hum of music drifted through the air. It was the beginning of the Harvest Festival, one of the town's oldest traditions. Children ran across the sidewalks holding paper lanterns, their laughter floating like tiny bells. Somewhere near the town square, a band was tuning their instruments. You could hear the faint pluck of a guitar, the echo of a drum, and the gentle murmur of a crowd waiting for the celebration to begin. Martha, a young woman who had returned to Maplebrook after years of living in the city, stood at her porch watching the first flicker of lights. She had almost forgotten how peaceful this place could be. In the city, nights were loud and filled with rushing people. But here, even the wind seemed to whisper stories. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped out into the cool air. The smell of cinnamon and roasted apples floated through the street. It reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen, of warm pies cooling on the windowsill, of laughter echoing through the old wooden house. As she walked, the town seemed to come alive around her. Old Mr. Jenkins was setting up his candy stall, arranging bright jars of caramel popcorn and homemade fudge. Two teenage boys were hanging up banners that said "Welcome to the Festival of Lights." And across the street, a group of little girls were trying to teach their puppy to wear a tiny pumpkin costume. Martha smiled. Everything felt so gentle, so familiar. She reached the square, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The lanterns glowed brighter, the lights twinkled above, and the festival music began slow, soothing, almost like a lullaby for the whole town. A woman at a booth offered her a cup of hot cider. "You're back home, aren't you, dear?" the woman asked kindly. Martha nodded. "Yes, it's been a long time." "Well," said the woman, handing her the warm cup, "Maplebrook always remembers its own." She took a sip. The cider was sweet and spicy. It warmed her from the inside. Around her, children's laughter mingled with the soft hum of violins. The square glittered like a dream. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The sound of footsteps, laughter, and music melted together until everything felt far away. The lanterns swayed above, like stars dancing in a small sky. It was strange how something so simple could feel so magical. As she wandered deeper into the fair, she came upon the Hall of Memories, a small wooden barn at the edge of the square. Every year, the townspeople filled it with old photos and keepsakes, memories of Maplebrook's past festivals. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of wood and hay. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, and soft music played from an old record player. On the walls were faded black and white photos, smiling families, hayrides, children holding pumpkins bigger than their heads. Martha's gaze stopped on one picture, a young girl standing with her parents, holding a lantern that glowed softly in her hands. It took her a moment to realize that was her. The memory came back slowly. The year she was 8, She had stayed up late just to see the fireworks at the end of the festival. Her father had lifted her onto his shoulders, and she had felt like she was floating in a sky full of stars. Now. Decades later, she stood in the same town, under the same lights, only her father's voice was gone. His laughter and echo lost to time. But somehow, being here made it feel close again. Outside, the fireworks began. Soft at first, a single golden burst in the sky. Then another, and another, until the whole town glowed beneath a shower of light. The children clapped. The music swelled. And Martha stood in silence, eyes lifted to the stars. She whispered softly to herself, "Home." The lights reflected in her eyes like memories reborn. The town shimmered under the soft hum of joy and nostalgia. And as the night deepened, the sounds faded. Laughter became whispers. Footsteps slowed, and the wind carried a song that only those who listened carefully could hear. It was the sound of peace, the sound of home, the sound of a town remembering who it was. Somewhere in the distance, an old clock struck 9. Martha began walking back home. Her steps slow, the air cool against her face. Each house she passed was glowing, some with candlelight, some with laughter, all with warmth. When she reached her porch, she turned once more toward the festival lights. In the distance, fireworks still bloomed, golden and soft, lighting up the dark sky. She whispered a small prayer, not to be heard, but simply to feel, to be grateful, to remember that even the smallest town, even the quietest night, could hold 1,000 memories waiting to shine again. And with that thought, she stepped inside, placed her shawl on the chair, and lay down near the window. Outside, the faint glow of lanterns still shimmered. Inside, her breathing slowed. The festival songs faded into dreams. Sleep came gently, like snow falling over a quiet town. And somewhere between waking and dreaming, Martha heard the soft whisper of Maplebrook. Whispers of an American Festival Part 2. The morning after the lights. The first light of dawn crept gently over Maplebrook. The air was cool, soft, and still, the kind of quiet that only comes after a night of joy. The festival lights had dimmed. The lanterns swayed lazily in the breeze, and the streets, once alive with laughter, now lay wrapped in a sleepy silence. Martha stirred awake to the faint sound of birds outside her window. The soft coo of doves mixed with the rustle of dry leaves. For a moment, she simply lay there, half awake, watching how the morning light drew golden lines across the wooden floor. The faint scent of cinnamon still lingered from the night before. She smiled. The harvest festival always had a way of leaving traces behind: a ribbon caught in a tree branch, a lantern forgotten on a porch, the echo of a violin in the cool morning air. She rose slowly, put on her old robe, and opened the front door. A gentle mist hung over the town, blurring the distant hills. Across the street, Mrs. Hargrove was already sweeping her porch, humming a tune Martha recognized from her childhood. Good morning, dear. The old woman called out, her voice cheerful as ever. Morning, Martha replied with a sleepy smile. You're up early. Asterisk. Ah, can't waste the morning after the festival, Mrs. Hargrove chuckled. The air smells of memories. Asterisk. Martha laughed softly and looked around. The decorations were still up, colorful banners fluttering, strings of tiny lights twinkling even in daylight. The town square, visible at the end of the lane, was quiet now, scattered with confetti and paper lanterns that had drifted down overnight. Asterisk. She decided to take a walk. She slipped on her boots, grabbed a cup of coffee, and stepped onto the path leading toward the square. Asterisk. As she walked, the soft crunch of gravel under her feet mixed with the sound of wind brushing through the trees. She passed by the bakery, its windows fogged from the heat inside. Through the glass, she could see Mr. Carver, the baker, pulling out trays of fresh bread. The smell made her pause. Asterisk. She opened the door. A bell jingled above her. Asterisk. Well, if it isn't our long-lost girl, Mr. Carver said with a grin. You look like you could use something warm. I couldn't resist the smell, Martha said, laughing. He handed her a small paper bag. Pumpkin muffins, fresh from the oven, on the house. Asterisk. She thanked him and stepped back outside, tearing a small piece from the muffin as she walked. It was soft, sweet, with a hint of nutmeg. It tasted like the town itself, like warmth and belonging. Asterisk. At the square, the remnants of last night's joy were scattered everywhere. A half-deflated balloon floated gently by, a forgotten scarf lay draped over a bench. But even in its quietness, the place felt alive, like the earth itself was still humming from all the laughter it had heard. Asterisk. Martha sat down on a wooden bench near the fountain. The water glimmered in the sunlight, and for a while, she just watched the ripples dance. Asterisk. She thought of her father again. He had loved mornings like this, calm, slow, filled with the smell of bread and dew. He used to tell her, morning after a festival is when the town shows its soul. And he was right. As she sat there, she noticed a young boy running across the square, holding a stack of small flyers. He couldn't have been more than 10. He ran up to her, slightly out of breath. Asterisk. Miss, you dropped this last night, he said, holding out a folded piece of paper. Asterisk. Martha blinked. I did. She took it. Asterisk. The paper was old, yellowed slightly at the edges. It wasn't hers, yet something about it felt familiar. Asterisk. She unfolded it carefully. It was a festival map, hand-drawn, with small notes scribbled in the corners, names of stalls, places, and events from the Harvest Festival. But in the bottom corner, written in faded ink, were 2 words. Asterisk. Meet me by the river. Asterisk. Her breath caught for a moment. The handwriting, it was her father's. Asterisk. She stared at it, her heart suddenly soft and heavy all at once. The note looked old, maybe from years ago. How had it ended up here? Asterisk. The boy tilted his head. Are you okay, miss? Asterisk. Yes, she said slowly, thank you. He nodded and ran off again, his sneakers slapping against the cobblestones. Martha sat still, holding the note. The world around her seemed too quiet even more. Only the fountain's soft trickle filled the air. Asterisk. After a while, she folded the paper and placed it gently in her pocket. The river wasn't far. It flowed behind the park, winding through the willows and old bridges. She hadn't been there in years. She decided she'd go. As she made her way down the cobbled street, the sound of the river grew clearer, a soft rush like whispers against the stones. Birds flew low over the water, and sunlight flickered through the leaves. The old wooden bridge came into view, worn smooth from years of footsteps, asterisk standing by the railing. She could see her reflection ripple with the current, asterisk. This had been her father's favorite spot. He used to bring her here every year after the harvest festival, to feed the ducks and watch the sunrise. They'd sit together, sharing hot cider, while he told her stories about when Maplebrook was young, about how the first settlers held the festival to give thanks for the land, the harvest, and the light that always came back after every winter. Asterisk. Martha felt the wind brush her hair. The sound of the river seemed to blend with those old words, as if her father's voice still lingered somewhere in the rustle of water. She leaned against the railing, eyes closed, and whispered, "I'm here, Dad." Asterisk. The air seemed to grow warmer, gentler, like an unseen hand resting softly on her shoulder. She stayed like that for a long time, until the sound of footsteps approached. Asterisk. It was Ben Harper, her childhood friend. He had grown older, his hair touched with gray, but his smile was the same. Asterisk. "Martha Taylor," he said with a grin. "Never thought I'd see you back here." Asterisk. "I didn't think I'd come back either," she replied. Asterisk. "You picked a good day for it," he said, leaning on the railing beside her. "The festival still feels alive out here." Asterisk. They stood in silence for a while, watching the water. Then Ben pointed to the folded map peeking out of her pocket. Asterisk. "Still got your old treasure maps, huh?" Asterisk. She laughed softly. "Seems like it. But this one, I think it found me." Asterisk. Ben raised an eyebrow, curious. "You always did believe in signs." Asterisk. "Maybe they believe in me too," she said, her voice distant. Asterisk. They talked for a while, about old times, about how the town had changed, about the bakery that still smelled the same, and the bridge that somehow never aged. Asterisk. When she finally turned to leave, Ben called out, "Hey, tomorrow night, we're lighting the river lanterns. Don't miss it." "I wouldn't," she said with a small smile, as she walked back home. The sky had turned pale blue, dotted with thin clouds. The world felt softer somehow, full of quiet reminders that life always circles back, that memories find their way home, even through time. Asterisk. By the time she reached her porch again, the mist had lifted completely. The town was awake now, children playing, dogs barking, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from windows. Asterisk. Martha sat on her porch steps, watching it all, the simple rhythm of life, steady and tender. She took the map out one more time and placed it beside her mug. The ink was faint, but the words still shimmered in the morning light. Asterisk. "Meet me by the river." Asterisk. She traced the letters with her fingertip, then looked out toward the hills. Somewhere beyond them, the river still sang its gentle song, and the promise of the next night of lanterns and light waited quietly. Asterisk. The harvest festival wasn't just a celebration anymore. Asterisk. It had become a journey through memory, through time, through the spaces between what was and what still could be. Asterisk. And for Martha, the story had only just begun. Asterisk. As the day warmed, the bells from the church tower rang softly through the air, and with each note, Maplebrook seemed to breathe again, alive with light, hope, and a whisper that said, asterisk greater than don't forget where you came from. Whispers of an American Festival Part 3. The Lanterns on the River asterisk. The sun began to set behind the golden fields of Maplebrook, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and amber. The town was once again preparing for the night, but this time, the celebration would be quieter, gentler. Asterisk, the river lantern ceremony was an old tradition, perhaps older than anyone in town could remember. It wasn't loud like the fireworks. It wasn't filled with laughter or music. It was silent, a tribute to time, memory, and everything that had ever been loved and lost. Asterisk by twilight. The townspeople began to gather by the Maple River. The bridge Martha had visited that morning was now strung with ribbons and glass jars holding flickering candles. Children carried baskets full of tiny paper lanterns, each one carefully crafted, painted, and folded with care. Asterisk, the river itself shimmered, calm, deep, and patient. It seemed to know that tonight it would hold the town's stories once again. Asterisk. Martha walked slowly down the path leading to the water. She wore a simple white shawl, and in her hands she carried a lantern of her own. It was shaped like a star, soft yellow in color, with a thin line of gold painted around its edges. Asterisk Ben was already there, helping to set up a small wooden dock. Evening, Martha, he said, his breath misting slightly in the cool air. Asterisk evening, she replied, smiling. It's beautiful, isn't it? Asterisk, he nodded. Always is. But somehow, this year feels different. Asterisk, Martha looked at the river. The lights reflected off the surface, trembling like memories. Maybe it's because we're finally seeing it for what it is, she said softly. Asterisk, Ben handed her a small candle. You remember how your dad used to say the river carries wishes? Asterisk, she nodded. I do. He said it remembers everything we forget. They both smiled at that, a tender silence hanging between them as the ceremony began. The mayor of Maplebrook stepped forward. He was an elderly man now, his voice slow and steady as he spoke. Asterisk tonight, he said. We send our lanterns down the river, for those we miss, for the dreams we hold, and for the light that always finds its way home. Asterisk, everyone bowed their heads. The only sound was the rustle of wind through the willow trees. Asterisk, one by one, lanterns began to float. Tiny flames flickered to life, soft and golden, as they drifted over the gentle current. The river slowly filled with light, hundreds of small glowing shapes, gliding into the distance like stars flowing through water. Asterisk, Martha knelt at the edge of the dock. The note her father had written was still folded in her pocket. She took it out, unfolded it carefully, and laid it inside her lantern. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered, "For you, Dad." Asterisk, she placed the lantern on the water, watching as it swayed once, twice, and then drifted away, its reflection shimmering beside the others. Asterisk, the sight was breathtaking. The whole river now looked like a moving galaxy, each lantern carrying a name, a memory, a whisper. Children stood hand in hand, watching their little lights drift off. Some people wept softly. Others just smiled, eyes full of peace. Asterisk Martha stayed there long after her lantern had vanished into the dark. The night was calm, the stars bright above. The hum of the town faded behind her, leaving only the murmur of the river. Asterisk Ben sat down beside her, tossing a small pebble into the water. Do you ever think they see it? The people we light them for? Asterisk Martha thought for a moment. I don't know, she said quietly. But I think maybe they feel it. Somewhere beyond the things we understand. Asterisk, he nodded. Your dad would have liked that answer. Asterisk, a soft laugh escaped her lips. Yeah, he always did believe the world was full of hidden doors. Asterisk, they fell silent again, watching the last of the lanterns disappear beyond the bend of the river. Fireflies began to appear in the grass, blinking softly like living sparks. Asterisk, for the first time in years, Martha felt something she hadn't in a long time, not just peace, but belonging. The kind that seeps into your heart slowly. The kind that makes you breathe deeper and smile without trying. Asterisk, after a while, most people began to leave. The square lights dimmed in the distance. Voices faded, and the chill of late evening began to settle in. But Martha stayed. Asterisk, she walked along the riverbank, her shoes crunching on the gravel. The trees whispered gently above her, and the cool air smelled faintly of water and pine. She could still see a few lanterns drifting far away, their lights growing smaller, like memories fading into dreams. Asterisk, as she reached the far end of the path, she saw something unusual. Asterisk, there, caught between the reeds, was a lantern, one that hadn't floated away. It was old, faded, almost fragile looking, its paper wrinkled with age. She leaned down to pick it up. Inside it, there was a small folded note. Her heart beat faster, carefully. She opened it. Asterisk, the handwriting was familiar. The same looping letters she had seen that morning. Asterisk, if you ever find this, follow the light to where it all began. Asterisk, Martha stared at the words, her breath catching in her throat. Asterisk, where it all began. She whispered, asterisk. Her mind raced, the old barn, the hall of memories, the meadow behind her childhood home. Could it be another message from her father? Or just a coincidence, something left behind long ago? Asterisk, the air grew still around her, as if even the wind was listening. The lantern's faint flame flickered once more before going out completely. Asterisk, she held the note close to her chest. The river whispered softly beside her, the water curling gently around her feet. Asterisk, Ben called from behind. You okay, Martha? Asterisk, she turned, startled, then nodded.
Yeah.
I just found something. Asterisk, he walked closer, his lantern still glowing faintly in his hand. What is it? Asterisk, she hesitated, then showed him the paper. He read the words slowly, his eyes narrowing slightly. Asterisk followed the light to where it all began. He repeated. That sounds like a clue. Asterisk, maybe, she said, half smiling. Or maybe it's a message that's been waiting a long time. Asterisk, Ben looked out toward the horizon, where the last of the lanterns had vanished. Well, wherever it began, looks like it's calling you back. Asterisk, Martha folded the note carefully and slipped it into her coat. Then, I guess I'll have to listen. Asterisk, they stood together for a long while, watching the moon rise over the river. The silver light touched the water, turning it into a mirror. The lanterns were gone now, but their reflections seemed to linger ghostly. Golden shapes dancing just beneath the surface. Asterisk in that moment. It felt as if the past and present had folded into one. Her father's laughter, the music of the festival, the scent of autumn, all swirling together in the cool night air. Asterisk when Martha finally turned to leave, she glanced back once more. The river looked calm again, empty but full in some quiet way. Asterisk the lights from the town shimmered behind her, and the stars above flickered like small promises. Asterisk as she walked up the path. The note in her pocket seemed to grow warm, almost pulsing, as though it held a heartbeat of its own. Asterisk that night, when she lay in bed, she dreamed of a field filled with lanterns floating above the earth like golden fireflies. Her father stood there, smiling, holding one in his hand. He whispered something she couldn't quite hear, and as the light surrounded her, she felt a peace deeper than sleep. Asterisk, and when she awoke at dawn, she knew exactly what she had to do next. Asterisk tomorrow. She would follow the light to where it all began. Whispers of an American Festival, Part 4. The road back to memory. Asterisk the morning came quietly to Maplebrook. The sky was pale, washed in soft silver light, and a thin layer of mist floated above the fields. From her window, Martha could see the river glimmer faintly beyond the trees, the same river that had carried hundreds of lanterns the night before. Asterisk she sat on the edge of her bed, holding the folded note in her hand. Asterisk greater than follow the light to where it all began. Asterisk the words looked older now, the ink faint, the paper soft from being handled too many times, but the message burned bright in her mind. Asterisk she had spent most of the night awake, thinking about it, wondering where it all began could mean. The barn, the old porch where her father used to tell stories, the hill behind their house where the first harvest festival had taken place. Asterisk she didn't know. But she knew one thing, she had to find out. Asterisk after breakfast, she wrapped a scarf around her neck, grabbed her jacket, and stepped outside. The air smelled of dew and distant smoke. Someone nearby was already burning leaves. The crunch of gravel beneath her boots sounded louder in the quiet morning. Asterisk as she walked toward the edge of town, the mist began to lift, revealing the gentle curves of the land. Maple trees arched above the road, their golden leaves falling one by one, drifting like sleepy confetti. Asterisk every step she took seemed to echo softly in her heart, familiar yet new, like walking through a dream she'd forgotten she'd once had. Asterisk she reached the old dirt lane that led to the Taylor farm, her childhood home. It had been years since she'd come this way. The fence was half broken now, the mailbox rusted, the sign reading Taylor Homestead barely visible beneath a tangle of vines. Asterisk her breath caught slightly as she stood there. Asterisk this was it. This was where it all had begun. Asterisk she pushed open the old gate. It creaked softly, a sound that instantly carried her back to her childhood. Summers spent chasing fireflies, winters spent beside the warm fire, her father's voice telling her stories about the stars. Asterisk the farmhouse stood quiet, its white paint faded, its porch sagging slightly at the edges. The windows reflected the pale light of morning like tired eyes that had seen too much. She stepped onto the porch slowly, her heart thudding. The wood groaned beneath her weight. For a moment, she just stood there, listening to the faint rustle of wind through the trees, the whisper of the river far away, the echo of a memory too old to touch. Pushing the door gently, she found it unlocked. Inside, the air was cool, still scented faintly of dust and pine. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, lighting up tiny particles floating like golden dust. The furniture was covered in white sheets, and the fireplace was cold. But everything was where she remembered: the old rocking chair, the shelf of books, the photograph of her parents smiling on the mantel. She walked over and picked it up. Her mother's eyes sparkled with the same kindness Martha remembered. Her father's arm was around her shoulders, his smile warm and proud. I'm back, she whispered. The floorboards creaked as she moved through the rooms. In the kitchen, she found her old mug still hanging by the window. In the hallway, her childhood drawings were faintly visible beneath layers of dust. It was as if the house had been waiting, patient, quiet, unchanging. Then she noticed something, the faint sound of ticking. It was coming from upstairs. She climbed the staircase slowly, the steps groaning under her feet. The ticking grew louder. It was coming from her father's old study. When she opened the door, she saw the source, an old pocket watch lying on the desk, still ticking softly after all these years. Beside it lay a small leather-bound journal. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The cover was worn, the edges frayed. When she opened it, she saw her father's handwriting, again, neat, looping, familiar. The first page read, "Greater than for my daughter Martha, if someday you come back. Follow the light, it will lead you to the truth we never finished." She felt a lump rise in her throat. Turning the pages carefully, she found sketches of lanterns, maps of the river, and a few old festival plans. But one page stood out. It showed a small hill near the farmhouse, with a single oak tree drawn at the top. Underneath, her father had written, "Greater than the first harvest light was born here." Her breath caught. The Oak Hill, that was where the first festival had started, decades ago, before the town even had a name. She remembered her father telling her that his own grandfather had lit the first lantern, there to mark the end of a harsh winter and the beginning of a new season of hope. Where it all began. She whispered, "Of course." Closing the journal, she stepped outside again, clutching it close. The mist had lifted entirely now, and the sun was spilling over the fields. She could see the hill, in the distance, tall, crowned with the silhouette of the old oak tree. Her heart beat faster as she began walking toward it. The grass brushed against her boots, and the air carried the soft scent of hay and wildflowers. The path curved gently upward, winding through patches of sunlight and shadow. Birds flitted between the branches, their wings glinting in the light. When she finally reached the top, the view took her breath away. The whole town of Maplebrook spread out below, tiny rooftops glowing in the golden morning. The river glimmered like a ribbon of glass. And beneath the oak tree, Half buried in the ground was something small and wooden. Asterisk, she knelt and brushed away the leaves. It was a box, old and carved with delicate designs. The lid bore the faint initials HT, her father's asterisk. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was another lantern, but unlike the others, this one was made of glass and metal, its frame etched with tiny stars. It looked ancient, yet perfectly preserved. Inside it was a folded note. She unfolded it carefully. Greater than Martha asterisk, the festival was never just a celebration. It was a promise that light would always return, no matter how dark the years became. Asterisk, this lantern was the first. It carries the flame of every generation who kept the town alive. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then it's your turn now. Asterisk, carry it home. Keep the light alive. Asterisk, tears welled in her eyes. She held the lantern close, feeling its cool surface against her chest. The wind brushed gently through her hair, whispering through the leaves. Asterisk, for the first time in years. She felt her father's presence not as a memory, but as something real, warm, steady. Surrounding her like sunlight. Asterisk, she sat beneath the oak tree for a long while, watching the world below. The town looked peaceful, small, and full of quiet beauty, the same way it had always been. Asterisk, finally, as the sun rose higher, she stood. She lit the lantern with a match from her pocket. The small flame flickered to life, golden and pure. Asterisk, the wind carried it gently, and for a moment, she thought she saw shapes in the light, laughter, faces. The glow of every festival that had ever been. Asterisk, she whispered softly. I'll keep it alive, Dad, I promise. Asterisk, as she walked back down the hill. The lantern glowed in her hands, its light reflecting in her eyes. The morning felt warmer, now brighter, alive. Asterisk, when she reached the edge of town again, people were already setting up for the final night of the harvest festival. Children waved to her, and she smiled, feeling something she hadn't in a long time. Purpose. Asterisk, the light wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a living thing, something to be shared, to be carried forward. And Martha knew she had found what she was meant to. Where it all began, had led her to where it must continue. Asterisk, the sun climbed higher. The bells rang in the distance, and the world seemed to hum softly with life. Maplebrook had always been a town of light. Now, it was her turn to keep it burning. Asterisk, and as she walked through the streets once more, holding the lantern high, people paused and smiled, because they could feel it too. The light had returned. Whispers of an American Festival, Part 5. The Last Glow. Asterisk. The final night of the Maplebrook Festival came quietly, like the soft sigh of the wind through the maple trees. Asterisk. The streets that had been filled with laughter and music now glowed in a softer, gentler light. The lanterns swayed lazily in the cool October air, and the moon hung low above the rooftops. Pale and calm, Asterisk, Martha stood at her porch once again, watching the last of the children run down the street, their laughter echoing faintly through the night. Some held leftover sparklers that fizzed out in tiny golden sparks, while others carried paper bags filled with the last bits of candy and caramel popcorn. Asterisk. Everything felt slower now, as if the town itself were ready to rest. Asterisk across the street. Mrs. Daly was taking down her decorations, carefully wrapping up each strand of lights. The music from the square had faded into a faint hum. Someone was playing a soft tune on a guitar, a melody that rose and fell like a lullaby. Martha smiled faintly. This festival, this week of warmth and memories, had reminded her of something she hadn't felt in years. Belonging. She walked down to the square one last time. The cobblestones glimmered faintly in the moonlight, and the air smelled of wood smoke and cinnamon. The booths were mostly empty now, their owners chatting quietly as they packed away boxes and folded tents. Asterisk, near the old oak tree stood Eli, the young man who had helped her set up decorations on the first day. He was sitting on a bench, strumming his guitar softly. Asterisk, didn't think you'd still be here, she said with a smile. Asterisk, he looked up, grinning. Couldn't leave before the last song. Asterisk, Martha sat beside him. It's beautiful. The way the town feels tonight. Asterisk, Eli nodded. Yeah, it's like the whole place is breathing. Asterisk, the music drifted through the air, gentle and sleepy. Around them, fireflies blinked like tiny floating stars. Somewhere, an owl hooted from the edge of the woods. The world seemed to have slowed down, just for this moment. Asterisk, after a while. They both sat in silence, two quiet souls under the same glowing sky. Asterisk, then. Eli asked softly, you ever think about staying here for good? Asterisk. Martha looked around at the houses glowing softly, at the trees swaying in the wind, at the town she'd once left behind. Asterisk, I think, she said, maybe this time I won't leave. Asterisk, Eli smiled and went back to his guitar. The notes floated like feathers, settling gently over the square. Asterisk, one by one, the lanterns began to dim. It was tradition, at the end of the festival, each family would blow out their light, as a symbol of rest. The festival would sleep until next year, and so would the town. Asterisk, Martha stood and watched as people came out of their homes, gently blowing out their lanterns. The square grew darker, but not empty. The stars above shone brighter, and the moonlight filled the space the lanterns had left behind. Asterisk, she closed her eyes and listened. The sound of laughter faded. The sound of footsteps softened. Only the whisper of the wind remained, brushing against the maple leaves, carrying with it the faint scent of apples and pine. Asterisk, it was the sound of peace. Asterisk, she thought of her father again, his laughter, his stories, the way he used to hum old songs when they walked home from the festival. Maybe, she thought, he was somewhere in that wind, in the rustling leaves, in the light of the stars, in the warmth that lingered even after the lanterns went out. A small voice broke her thoughts. Miss Martha. Asterisk, it was a little girl, the same one she'd met earlier in the week, the one with the pumpkin lantern. She held it now, flickering softly. I forgot to blow mine out, the girl said shyly. Martha knelt down and smiled. That's all right. You can make a wish before you do. Asterisk, the girl closed her eyes, whispered something no one could hear, and gently blew out the candle. A tiny trail of smoke rose into the night air, curling up toward the stars. Asterisk, what did you wish for? Martha asked softly. Asterisk, the girl smiled. That the lights come back again next year. Asterisk, Martha's heart warmed. That's a beautiful wish. Asterisk, As the child skipped away, the final lantern in the square flickered once more, then went dark. The town was wrapped in moonlight now, silver and still. Martha turned to leave. Her steps were slow, soft against the cobblestones. The night air brushed against her hair like a whisper of farewell. When she reached her porch, she paused and looked back one last time. Maplebrook lay quiet. Resting under the stars, a town wrapped in peace, in memories, in the gentle rhythm of another year gone by. She went inside, lit a single candle on her bedside table, and sat by the window. The flame danced quietly, reflecting in her eyes. She whispered. Thank you, to the town, to the past, to the little girl's wish, to the peace that finally filled her heart. Then, she lay down, pulling the blanket close. Outside, the wind hummed softly through the trees, carrying the last song of the festival away. And as sleep came, she dreamed of lanterns of golden lights floating into the sky, rising higher and higher until they became stars. The same stars that watched over the same stars that had watched her as a child. The same stars that would return, next year, to glow above the festival once again. The world was quiet. The lights had gone out. But the warmth remained in hearts, in memories, in dreams. And somewhere, beneath the whispering maples, the town of Maplebrook slept.